Hi, I'm Nina Bosky, and welcome to LifeBites, where each and every week we'll get you inspired in the areas of life, business, and media. We'll help you dare, dream, do, and be so you can get out of your head into your soul in order to tune in and take a bite. This week, we are getting you business inspired. Hi, everybody. I'm Nina Bosky for LifeBites Business Inspired. With over 40 years of executive coaching experience, 58 years in a daily practice in mind-body disciplines, Stephen Josephs, who is an author as well, shapes business cultures and allows leaders to excel and start thinking in ways they never thought possible, especially in today's ever-changing hectic business environment. With that said, let's welcome Stephen Josephs.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, Nina. As you know, I'm inspired by your website and all the things you're doing. So let's see where our conversation goes.
I love it because, you are definitely, you and I are a little bit of kindred spirits because I love the ability to bring in the West, but I definitely love the ability to bring in the East. And I have to tell you, even though you've been at this quite a while, you're very seasoned and you bring a lot of wisdom to business leaders all over the world for decades now. I think your wisdom in this day and age, right here, right now, in this moment, is probably the most needed. So let's back up the truck a little bit. Okay. 40 plus years ago, you're just starting out. Did you always know you wanted to be in this industry? How'd you get to where you are?
Well, I had an NLP institute and trained business people in it and communication skills. And then one of the people who went through the program started a company that was really based on my ability to model top people. I know you're interested in sales. And most of the time, what I do is I go into a company and I would say, do you have anybody who outperforms everybody else by 10 times? And they can't tell you why, and you don't know why, but you'd like more of that in your business. If you hire me, I will find out why, and that will inform decisions about training and selection.
Wow.
And so that's how I learned about business. And then I started going into companies and just hanging out for a day, and anyone could come and see me. The doctor is in. And they would just bring any kind of problem and I would coach them. But it wasn't called coaching, as you know, way back then. Somebody on a plane flight asked me what I did, and I described that. And he said, you sound like a coach. And I said, coach? That's catchy.
Yeah. Who knew it'd become such a trend, let alone, you know what I mean, back in the day, right?
Right. And then the other thing that you mentioned in your intro is, I've every day for 58 years, really, I probably missed 10 days in those 58 years. I've done some kind of mind-body discipline, 2 to 3 hours a day. I'm just a geek when it comes to that stuff. And like you, I'm interested in things from the East and things from the West. So one of the things I wanted to bring into our discussion is how I describe meditation to people. So let's say that you and I are outside a room and it's completely dark. And we'd like to open the door and find out what's in the room, but there's no source of illumination there. And it would be great if we had a clear light, that we could open the door and just shine it everywhere and get a vision of what it is. But we don't have a clear light. What we've got is slide projectors with little slides of our past, our ideas of who we are, our preoccupations, and now we're looking around the room, but we can't see that much because it's informed and illuminated by preconceptions. So what would it be like if we could take those slides and dump them out? Well, you can't just get amnesia for the whole thing. You need them to sort of to be less saturated in color, and you need the source of illumination to just shine through them. And Another way I think about this, do you have that picture of that cube? Can you get that up?
Sure. So let's put it up right now.
Yeah. Okay. So when you look at this cube, it has this optical illusion that it does for us, which is it looks like one plane is forward and then another plane is behind it. And if you stare at it long enough, they switch.
Wow.
They go back and forth. So here's the deal. Things are always changing, as we know. And sometimes we have success and sometimes we have failures. But if you look at this image and not pay attention so much to the image itself, but the space around it and inside it. And that's the space of equanimity. And if you could just reside in that space, then failure and success don't matter as much, but you can just pay attention to it and lovingly accept with your awareness whatever is arising in that space. And when you do meditation well and you get used to it, you get more confidence in that space and less disturbed by the comings and goings of the images in front of you. And that's what meditation does for you. On the other hand, we are not sitting in a cave someplace in a monastery, or, we have lives and we have work.
Yes.
And so part of the idea is that work actually helps us. So this is what I think is really happening in executive coaching or any kind of coaching, is that what you're trying to do is acquaint the person with the idea that their activities and their responsibilities inside their role, that's actually a spiritual path. Mm-hmm. So in psychodrama, going over to the Western side of the aisle now, is there's a saying that J.L. Moreno used to have: the self emerges through roles. So just think of this. You are in the role of a leader, or whatever your role is. You can be in the role of a husband, a wife, a partner, you name it, a friend. And there are role demands because roles have reciprocal relationships and people are demanding things of you. And those demands are a good thing because how you respond to them allows you to show up as your best self. So the other idea is the self can emerge through roles, but it can also get submerged in roles. So sometimes people have roles that aren't a fit. And wow. There's an old joke about a guy who goes to get a suit fitted and the tailor says, "Oh, it fits just fine." And he says, what do you mean? This sleeve on the right is short, the one on the left. And the tailor says, no. It fits fine. You're standing wrong. So he convinces him to adjust his posture. And now he's kind of hobbling down the street. And a friend meets him and says, "Wow, what a beautiful suit." He said, "Yeah, this tailor up the street just made it for me." He said, "Well, if he can fit somebody as misshapen as you, he must be a genius." So the idea is sometimes we get our roles delivered by our parents or our ideas of who we think we ought to be. And they're just the wrong roles for us. They don't let us emerge in our best selves. So one thing to keep in mind is, how are you showing up in your roles, and are your roles the best vehicle for being your best self?
Wow. Let's ponder that one, because I think that's really powerful.
It was so funny, Nina, because when you said that, I thought, we should stop here. Just think about that. Yeah. And then you were right there.
Yeah. It's just,
yeah. So what do you think about that?
I just, there is a lot to unpack just in that. And I think if, in today's society, we're just bombarded with images and roles, and what you just said about, oh my gosh, you can't even be intentional necessarily about that role unless you really stop and really think about that. And the fact that you have roles that you're playing that don't fit that are outdated. I think that's really important. And I don't know if we spend enough time stopping and
Right.
really thinking about that, because
Yes.
if I'm not thinking about it, I remember talking to an executive right when the pandemic started, and I said, well, what makes you happy? And she said, I don't know. I never thought about it. If you don't know what drives you, if you don't know what role you want to play in this world on this stage of life, then you're going to be washed around almost like, in my opinion, like a washing machine. It'll
Yeah.
take you here, it'll take you there. It'll be my parents' programming, my culture, my religion, my friends, whatever it is. And you won't be intentional about what you're creating. So I think what you're saying is so powerful in regards to the roles that we play, whether it's a leader in a business, leader in life, right? We're leaders in our own lives.
Right. So, just to switch it a little bit around, you may have roles that you've chosen for yourself that have the potential to bring out the best in you. And yet the way you behave and respond to people may be suboptimal. So I wanted to just use an example from a client. So I had a client, people have these 360-degree interviews, and it comes back and you say, oh, you ought to listen to people more, or blah, 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 blah. So this guy came with the idea of he had this suboptimal behavior. He was sarcastic. And he said he could be really mean.
Mm.
So in this one particular instance, someone had mischaracterized his work, and he was offended by this, and he just cut the guy down very sarcastically. And so we were in the session, and I said, do you want to explore this? So he said, yeah. And I said, well, so part of you thinks that you shouldn't be sarcastic, but there's another part of you that's great at it. So let's talk to that part, because that part's got a lot of juice. So we start interviewing that part, and the part says, you ask it, well, by being sarcastic in that way, what did you want to do? And he said, I wanted to set the record straight,
Mm.
And then, so I'm going to describe a process, and then I'll tell people how to get to a source of this where they can learn it themselves.
Okay, great.
But what happens next in the process, I said, okay, just imagine you set the record straight. Have that part just say, wow, I did it. Is there anything that's more important than that? So the part says, yeah, I want to achieve dominance, and then say, great, good. So just imagine that you did that. Is there anything more important than that? And then he said, yeah, if I got that all settled, I guess I could relax. And then you'd say the part, good, just have that part relax. What would be more important than that? And he said, well, really just a sense of peace. So I said, okay, just imagine you have this sense of peace as an ongoing way of being. Just get it in your body fully, every cell. So it's just really infused into you. And how would having this sense of peace as an ongoing way of being affect wanting to set the record straight? And then he said, well, I guess I wouldn't have to. It's not
Wow.
important. And how would it affect wanting to dominate the other person? But that's not necessary at all.
You're
I
at
might
peace.
want to bring some other facts into the conversation, but I don't have to grab the guy by the lapels. And then you say, okay, so this ongoing sense of peace, this part that's sarcastic, when did it learn to do that? And I guess when I was about 8 or 9, say, okay, let's go visit that part, and just imagine you could, as an adult, put your hands on that younger self and just infuse it with a sense of peace, and tell it that you are from its future, and that you'll have this accessible to you, and you'll have many choices, including sarcasm if that's useful. And so then he goes back, and the reason I'm saying this is an example, and there's a place you can go further than this, but just stopping at this place, you can get your 360-degree feedback, and it can say, you're a little rough on people. And you can say, okay, I'm going to try not to be so rough on people. I'm just going to listen. But when things get really hot, your nervous system knows what to do. Exactly.
It's like all of that goes out the window because you're trying to access it from a part of, I think, your brain and your mind that will just go into survival mode, right? Especially, particularly if we get triggered.
Right.
And I think what you're doing is getting underneath it, so you don't have to go to the place of sarcasm. You might choose it, but that becomes a choice versus a sudden reaction because now I'm going to put that person in their place.
Exactly, Nina. And also the meta learning that you get from doing this, again and again with different parts of yourself, is that every part can lead you to someplace sublime, even though it has maybe behaviors that are not desired. But if you really, if you do it enough, you start to realize that all these parts of yourself, no matter what they're doing or what they express, have your best interests at heart. And that best interest really has to do with those levels of peace. And that method is called core transformation. And your listeners and viewers can find it. They could just go on the web and
on your
look,
website,
just
on Google,
on the web in
yeah,
general, and just I'm not teaching it, but I'm a big fan of it, and that's a long story. But I love the people. Core transformation. Yeah.
Right. Well, and that makes sense. Let's back up the truck even a little bit more, though, because when I started in this, I remember when I left my corporate cushy TV job, media job, that my boss at the time said, "Oh, let's bring back that emotional girl, that change girl. She's always talking about this stuff," right? So I kind of fell into coaching. It wasn't something that I sought out to do. But it was very much, don't look at anything that is personal or anything that is emotional, anything that's going to bring up something, particularly from your childhood. That would have been like way off the charts. So how has leadership changed over the years? Because I certainly have seen it evolve, but from your perspective, given the work that you do, how have you seen it changed and where is it evolving to?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about stages of maturity of leaders, and that has actually become more well known. So when Bill Torbert first started doing this work, and then later Bill Joyner and I wrote Leadership Agility, it wasn't as well known. But the idea is this: that cognitively and behaviorally we change. Just like a 2-year-old is different than a 5-year-old, is different than a 12-year-old, cognitively and emotionally different than a 21-year-old. And yet we used to think that when they got to be 21, okay, the game is over. But that's not really true. And people develop through stages of psychological maturity in ways that are just as profound as the difference between a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old, say. It really is that profound. And so Leadership Agility, the book really describes that, but the real shorthand message, if you want to simplify it, has to do with getting over yourself. So,
I'm sorry.
So I used to say, unless you're Miss Piggy and self-importance is part of your brand identity, it's bad for business. And the reason it's bad for business is it's bad for business because you have a model of leadership that's like a hub and a spoke model, where your brain is at the hub, everyone else is a spoke. They feed things into you and you make the decisions.
Yeah.
And that is a way to guarantee that you'll never scale. You won't have a good succession plan. And
Oh,
also,
you are music to my ears right now, Stephen, because a lot of times it happens more in like new managers, but I see some seasoned leaders and their ego becomes so big that they have to control everything that they don't hire people better than themselves.
right.
And I that's like death if you want to scale, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just in a few words of praise for the less sophisticated stages on the way to that, there are two stages that we talk about in leadership agility that where the ego is strongest, and it's the expert stage and the achiever stage. And in those stages, in the expert stage, you're trying to be the smartest person in the room. You're trying to demonstrate that you have all the answers. In the achiever stage, that you led the charge, that you were the driving force behind the initiative, et cetera, et cetera. And if anyone else comes up with an idea that's not yours, not invented here, it's just shunned, and you're not really a great person to work for. And so that has but the reason those stages are there is to develop your capacity for expertise and skill. And so if you and I, if you went to have heart surgery, I'd want my heart surgeon to have gone through the stage of wanting to be the best heart surgeon in the world and
Yeah.
be known for it. And that's fine if that's your driving ambition. But if you want to lead in a way that uses the collective intelligence of your group, that's not the way to do it. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have a brilliant company with an egomaniac at the helm. We are all using Apple products right now, and Steve
And what a
Jobs.
visionary, right? Not a
Yeah,
great manager, but a great visionary.
yeah, exactly. And so there are all kinds of ways of getting there, but the idea is what kind of life do you want to lead, and how you're going to use your business, not just to accumulate wealth, but to really make best use of your life. And that's why I think that meditation is so important. So back to that story about the sarcasm, there's a stage you can take it beyond this,
Okay.
which is, most meditation is used now as a way of stress reduction. And I know that more sophisticated ways to use it, like to build your energy and stuff, and that comes from various mind-body disciplines. But there's also a way of using meditation that is that goes beyond that, and is really moving towards what people describe as enlightenment. So the idea of the self as sort of dissolving in a way. So you can be in the middle of a meditation and you can be paying attention to your breath and really relaxing your body in a very beautiful way. But then there's this sense that there's still someone who's observing, that somebody who's observing the meditation, that you are present, could say, who is watching all this? And then you could say, where is the one who's watching all this? And then, and that's a very interesting question. And often you can actually find a location for it, and it might not even be in your body. It could be in your etheric field someplace around your head. So I want to tell you a little story about this. One time I was, because I had some medical condition I was trying to treat, I was in a room full of people, and everybody had an intravenous line in their arms. So we're all sitting there, and there are also guests. So there's one guy there and his wife is there. And the nurse came by and she injected something into the line that went in my arm. And I had this reaction to it where it felt like my arm was on fire and I was in excruciating pain. So I'm just squirming around in my seat. I'm trying not to cause too much of a commotion, but I'm going nuts. And this woman comes up to me, her husband she was there with her husband. She said, "It looks like you're in pain." And I said, "I am." She said, "Is it all right if I take it away?" And I said, "Please." So she takes her hands and she puts them on my ankle, and the pain went away instantly. I'm talking about from an 11 to a 0 the
Wow.
moment she touched me. And I just looked at her with a sense of relief and kind of awe and said, "How did you do that?" And she said, "Well, it was in your aura, so I took it away."
Well, let's we're you're saying so many beautiful nuggets here, and I want to connect them a little bit. You were talking about just a few minutes ago, you're talking about expert and achiever, the stages of leadership, right? So now we're talking about also moving into beyond the self in terms of whether you're a leader in your own life, a leader in business, etc. So there's all these different ways that we can access, whether it's through this instantaneous healing, whether it's becoming the observer. From your experience, have you seen people that are in that achieve mode, achieve mode, achieve mode? I got to be the expert. I got to be the best. I'm going to be the best. Be able to achieve what you're talking about in those roles? Or do you advance to the next level before you get to being able to be a little bit more holistic in your approach, if that makes
Well,
sense?
they may stay in their same role, they haven't moved on the org chart, but but how they approach it is a whole different way. So here's what happens. All those sort of like nasty, ego-oriented, abrasive sometimes behaviors, which have their own function, like you interview the part that's sarcastic, it had its own ideas and, it was trying to do something positive. What happens is when the sense of self no longer needs to be protected, and you can just be present, back to the room of opening the door with a clear light. You're looking in. So you still have those skills and capacities that you developed, but you use them a lot more wisely and with a lot more heart and compassion.
Mm.
So, for instance, the guy who was sarcastic, part of being sarcastic, being good at sarcasm is being very, very perceptive. So that's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And also understanding the response that you get. It's looking for a dominance response, but still there's a sensitivity to the other person. And so those things are still present, that that you can elicit responses in other people and you can care about them in a different way. And then you can enter that conversation differently because you don't have to demonstrate that you're in charge.
I always say that, really developing EQ skills, which is really what you're becoming. You're managing your own energy and that of others, but really and truly, you're learning how to respond versus react. And
Right.
I don't know about you, but I find that there's a lot of people reacting, in the workplace. So, how do you work with somebody that, let's say they're in a coaching session or they're just a leader and they're like, uh-huh, yeah, uh-huh, okay. Oh, you know what? I got to look at my Apple Watch. Uh-huh. Yeah, okay.
You do
We
that so
are,
well, Nina.
well, the problem is I can do it too, right? But I become conscious of it.
Yeah.
The reality is that you've used it several times in this last kind of, conversation piece. I
Uh-huh.
think it is so astronomically important is to become present.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
And it
So
is,
I want to give you another
yeah.
example of something that I do in coaching that you can sort of do it with yourself too. So let's say that you're coaching somebody and they're getting ready for a meeting and or a negotiation. And so you say, okay, so they have their own ideas of what they want to have happen. You say, so what are you going to say? How are you going to open it up?
Mhm.
And they say, well, my position is this and blah, blah, blah. And they give all the reasons that support their position and stuff like that. And usually that's what they get to. And then I say, okay, well, let's prepare for this. That's a good start. How about you? So let's say it's you, Nina, and you're going to talk to Bob.
Okay.
So I've got, say, I've
Right.
got
Me and
all,
Bob.
I've got, I've got all this from you, Nina. And then I say, so Nina, how about you become Bob in
Ooh.
this interview? And then we'll see what it's like to be him. So then I would say, okay, Nina, just be Bob as much as you can without being a caricature of him, how he speaks, the cadence of his voice, even the tonalities, his facial expressions, everything that you can muster that's Bob like. So then you do that. And I say, Bob, how are you? I haven't seen you before. Can you describe yourself for me? And they say, well, I'm 6'1" and I weigh about 200 pounds and I'm sort of balding on the sides and I've got, et cetera, et cetera. They say, Bob, who's at home? Who populates your house? Is it, dogs, cats, chickens? Who's there? And, is there a partner? Are there children? And then say, I understand, by the way. And so you get really, he has to go deep. Oh, first I would say, Bob, so what's at stake for you in that meeting? What's important to you? And then as Bob, you say what it is. And then I say, well, Bob, I happen to know what Nina's going to say to you in that meeting. Would you like to hear it?
Okay.
So as Bob, you get the whole list of things, and the typical reaction to that is, oh, that wouldn't work so well. And then you get, so, well, that might be a good point. We could keep that in. But anyway, they sort through it.
Well,
And then,
this is really good because I actually just went through a situation like that where I had a meeting and I needed something from somebody, right? And this exercise would have been really good for me even now after the meeting because there's a next step. So I'm still in the process of the sale, right? So now that I know who Bob is per se, right? I now can have that conversation and be able to kind of understand both sides. So I know there's more to
right,
the story. So
right.
let's keep going. So
So here's the second part of it. So then, I would say, Nina, is there anything about Bob that sort of gets under your skin? And then you would say, whatever it is, that sort of irritates you about Bob. Say, so maybe he's a jerk in some ways. So then you say, well, okay, just imagine now that you acted like Bob. Not that you do. You probably do everything else, anything but.
I would never be like Bob, Stephen.
Right.
I'm kidding.
I know. That's the point. That's often the case. So what you do is you say, just imagine though that you ended up acting like him. What emotions would have to be driving it in you? And go ahead and feel those. So then you kind of feel what they are. And where's that hang out in your body? Where are the constrictions? Oh, it's in my solar plexus, my shoulders, my chest, my jaw. And then you say, so just now there are several things that you can do, but one of them that we haven't talked about so much is, let's say that you feel it. So where do you imagine you might feel something like that? Where do you carry tension, Nina?
Me.
Yeah.
Usually my shoulders. It's just
Okay, so
like
just
I get like,
imagine,
yeah. Yeah.
just imagine that you were imagining you were acting like Bob and it showed up in your shoulders.
Yeah. I even
So
went
that,
like this. And when you were talking about that, I was like, ooh, this is interesting. That's where I carry it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then you start there and you say, okay, so that's the location of it. The energy that's there, what's the size and shape of it?
like two little like mini balls, a little bit
Yeah,
bigger than a golf ball.
right. And and those little golf balls might have sort of a weight to them
Oh
and a
yeah,
density.
totally. I was like this. I wanted to roll them off, right?
Right. So you just get into feeling that, and then you say, it's true that I am aware of these ball-like structures in my shoulders. You could say, I'm aware of that. Where is the I that's aware of it? And
Mm,
just let that be any place. This is a total imaginative question. So go back in your shoulders and say, I am aware. Say to yourself, I am aware
I'm
of this
aware
tension.
of this tension.
Yeah. Where's the I that just is aware of that?
For me, it's in the center of my head.
Aha. So just go to the center of your head,
Mhm.
and that's the location. What's the size and the shape of the energy there?
It's like this, like a little
Yeah.
bit, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so just sense into it, sensing in and through it, and feel it might have a color to it, it might have a density,
Mhm.
just feel into that. And then ask it um, if it would like to be invited to dissolve, melt, and relax into the field of awareness that's all around and through you.
You know, it's interesting. The minute I went to my head, it started to dissolve. So when you just said dissolve, I was like, there is
You
no
were already
tension.
there.
I was already there. I mean, your voice is so calming that I would imagine, in terms of working with clients as well, you bring just by your presence a lot of calmingness to a situation. I would imagine also this exercise in dialogue. I see a lot of people, and this the reason why I was laughing about, I'd never act like Bob, is that when people get into conflict, I find that the thing that I'm upset about most of the time is the same feeling that they're feeling about me. And I'm thinking, if I
I
find
know.
out, how could that be true? I'm right and you're wrong, and you have to play this dance in that level of understanding and compassion for the other person's kind of world and who they are. It brings such a level of kind of reducing that I have to be right. And I would imagine this kind of conversation in either constructive conversations or actual conflict could be really reduced heavily by just this exercise alone.
So this is from 2,500 years ago. Lao Tzu, who's my favorite philosopher, poet, meditator. It goes like this: the handbook of the strategist has said, do not invite the fight, accept it instead. Better a foot behind than an inch too far ahead, which means look a man straight in the face and make no move. Open your hand, show no weapon, bare your breast and find no foe. But as long as there be a foe, value him, respect him, measure him, be humble towards him. Let him not strip from you, however strong he be, compassion, the one wealth which can afford him.
Wow. Wow. You can tell by the body of your work, you have been in the Western world, Eastern world, and talking to us about meditation and accessing a deeper part of ourselves. What do you think the leader of today needs to know going out into the world today?
I think they really need to be able to drop the sense of self and to drop the things that anesthetize them. The word aesthetic means of the senses, and the antonym, the exact opposite, is anesthetic. And they need to not be numb and not be numbed by fame, by ambition, and by wealth.
Oh, wow. It's a few leaders that need to hear this one as well, because I think it's fine to have wealth, it's fine to have ambition, but it's gotta, in my opinion, has to be in balance. We're so out of balance at this point in our culture and our particularly in our business, in the business world. So you have the book Leadership Agility. You
Yeah.
also have another book called Dragons at Work. What is that about?
Dragons at Work is sort of a long case study of a very uptight IT executive who gets a coach whose name is she's
Hey, I know a
Chinese.
few of those.
And she's magnificent. She lives with her sort of Taoist immortal grandfather, and they're always having conversations about what's happening at work for her. And it's I love that book. It's
Oh,
not great literature, so
it's a
but
par it's a parable, right? It's a little,
it's a
yeah,
novel. It's a
novel.
little
Oh.
novel. Yeah.
So what inspires you personally?
What inspires me?
What inspires you?
Um, just knowing that every difficulty, every challenge, every goal that I meet is a portal to a wide open space that's very beautiful, and it falls in love with everything that it encounters, and from that space, life is quite beautiful and worth living, and the sense of care and appreciation. Lao Tzu also said, the invincible shield of caring is a weapon from the sky against being dead.
So I want to thank you, Stephen Josephs, for being with us today. You would like to share a song and it has a poem in it. So tell us a little bit about that, and we'll leave the audience with this beautiful song.
Well, this, we didn't talk about any of this, but people, I think, today are upset with the sort of animosity that pervades our political discussions. And so Lao Tzu again said, those who would take over the earth and shape it to their will never, I notice, succeed. The earth is like a vessel so sacred that at the mere approach of the profane, it is marred. And when they reach out their fingers, it is gone. For a time in the world, some force themselves ahead, and some are left behind. For a time in the world, some make a great noise, and some are held silent. For a time in the world, some push themselves aboard, and others are pushed out. At no time in the world will a man who is sane overreach himself, overspend himself, overrate himself.
Very wise words at a time in history where the old is coming to an end and hopefully a new will emerge, even in leadership. So thank you for your wisdom. I hope this, for all our LifeBites audience, that this will help you move forward in your own life with a little bit more balance and understanding. So thank you, Stephen Josephs, for being with us today and bringing your light and wisdom to the world.
Thank you, Nina. It's such a pleasure hanging out with you.
Yeah, I'll have you back for sure. All right, I'm Nina Bosky for LifeBites Business Inspired. And remember, until next time, take a bite out of life before life takes a bite.